Here in part 2, let's ask, what is the carbon cycle? As we saw in a previous lecture, major aspects of life in the history of Earth can be expressed with general equations that describe the increase and the decrease in atmospheric CO2. What I'd like to focus on here is the aerobic process of oxygenetic photosynthesis, where CO2 is combined with water and sunlight energy to produce a carbohydrate and the release of oxygen. That reduces CO2 concentration. And as we described earlier, there are other processes such as respiration and volcanic activity that increase CO2 concentration. If we simply add these two equations together, we create a cycle. So let's start off with a clicker question. Which of these reactions does not represent a biological process? A, CO2 plus hydrogen sulfide to produce a carbohydrate, water, and sulfur. B, CO2 plus calcium silicate to produce calcium carbonate plus silicon dioxide. C, carbohydrate plus oxygen results in CO2 plus water plus energy. Or D, CO2 plus water plus energy yields carbohydrate and oxygen. The answer is B. That is a geological process. The others are biological processes. So let's take those equations that we were talking about and put them into a cycle. In the cycle here, we start off with atmospheric CO2, which comes into plants in the way of photosynthesis. Or it could come into prokaryotes and algal systems and others that are living in the ocean or in the soil to also produce a carbohydrate. Those plants or those microbes can also have a respiratory cycle in which that carbohydrate is now combined with oxygen, resulting in the release of CO2. So we have processes that bring in CO2 and processes that release CO2. When plants die, microbial activity will also begin to decompose that material, releasing CO2. That creates a cycle.